Hello to all, here today in the Tier 8 American Tech Tree aircraft carrier, the USS Lexington. We're here today in the map Two Brothers. The mode is Domination. We're top tier, so we're in 6 to 8 matchmaking, and we're against an enemy Kaga. On the enemy side we have a North Carolina Nelson, Nice now Fuso Fuso, North Carolina Nice now slightly difficult, and then Aiden, Prince Eugen, Helena, Gorizia. The Aiden might prove some difficulties, and then two destroyers in the one destroyer rather, in the way of a single Bliskavika. So, starting off, we're gonna just head out with our attack planes, or rocket planes. This is of course the F4U1D Corsair on Lexington. I'm running the Havar setup because I prefer the Havars over the Tiny Tims due to the low amount of Tiny Tims. The Tiny Tim is a better rocket than the Havar rocket. However, because you only launch 2 rockets per plane per Corsair, one just slung underneath here, in the twin mount, I find the munitions density to be a bit too low to consistently hit targets, especially small targets such as destroyers, and thanks to the matchmaking that the Lexington can see, where sometimes you're a top tier bully, such as this case, I prefer the Havars with 33mm of penetration. 33mm of penetration doesn't pen high to your battleship belt, armor, and such, as we do find the Bliska immediately, but you can still pen superstructure and external plating if you know where to aim, so as long as you're precise with them, even though they require a bit more work and have a slightly more picky side on ellipse, as you can see here, the payoff when you get light targets with the Havars is more than worth it in my books. Starting off with a very conservative 6 rocket strike, ducking out of the fighter screen. I'm over in Edinburgh and Bliskavika, but it's not too bad. Oh, overshot that a little bit by using my speed boost. He ducks in Gorizia, North Carolina, Fuso Nelson. Based on what I see, I'm gonna move my carrier hull to the other side. Looks like they're pretty heavy on this side. And I'm gonna relaunch the torpedo bombers. But as I was mentioning, I prefer the Havars. I just think they're superior against light targets. Obviously they're flying repeatedly over that AA cluster. They were not too successful in inflicting damage. Thanks to the nature of Two Brothers as a map, the ships tend to stay pretty close together because there really is no cover, other than, well, finding each other. So, it is what it is. Kaga seems to have taken a chance at my destroyers. I believe the Bliska hard spotted by Minsk, who might not have concealment expert, and that is why he did leave. Bliska smokes up. However, I can see him in the last known location in smoke. I'm gonna arm my drop now. Let's see if I can make a torpedo run right onto him since he's so kindly just reversing for us. Pop my heel. Bit too close to the Eugen to make a repeat run. Score a hit, score 2 hits onto the Bliska, and score the 3rd hit onto the Edinburgh. Pretty spicy. Relaunch. So that eliminates their only destroyer. My destroyer, on the other hand, is being harassed. But he is at least with the Gorizia. Gorizia does not have impressive AA, but is better than nothing. Score 1 torpedo hit on that Aiden on the follow-up strike. But not a bad start. We've eliminated the enemy destroyer. Gonna go after the Eugen, actually. And try to light the Aiden. Moving forward, based on the fact that shells are coming in toward my Scharnhorst, but nothing is detected, I assume the Aiden managed to pop his own smoke. He was borrowing the Bliskavikas. Still undetected, still undetected. Finally, I pop across the corner, and Nelson provides AA spotting along with the Eugen for the Edinburgh, so they are able to attack. Kaga pops a fighter, so we can't stick around for long. I'm gonna ditch my bombs onto the Eugen. 3 bomb hits. I'm gonna go over the bombs momentarily, but I'm gonna try and save these from the fighter plane that did lock us. No dice with saving them from the fighter plane. Nice, now an Eugen. Now the HE dive bombers are carried by the same plane as this torpedo bomber. They are probably still the main armament of the Lexington, in spite of all things. So they're a fairly sturdy but slow aircraft, as the SB2C is here. You can see top speed of about 164 knots, and a cruising speed of just about 145 if not mistaken. Okay, it's 135-ish. Or even slower, but it's a tanky American aircraft. Looking for the knives now because I don't want to swoop into overlapping AA. Now Nelson doesn't have AA basically, and I did get a fire onto the Eugen, so we'll see, but... Okay, knives now is clearly too close. Let's see if we have distance to arm this on the Eugen. Doesn't look like it to me, but we'll find out. Torpedo bombers taking some pretty hefty losses there in that combined AA. You can see even though I'm top tier, pays not to dive into AA clusters like that. Looking for an isolated target considering the game state. They're all clumped up, so maybe I can go after that Helena. However, my teammates do dispatch the Eugen, which means that the Nice now is actually relatively isolated. Unfortunately for me, he's over that mountain, as you saw. Or he's beside the mountain, which obstructs my preferred flight path. Kaga coming in with attack planes. Ooh, I'm getting shot at. Holding down on the air brake. A bit too early, flying out and away. 14 rockets strike the Nice now superstructure. Gonna temporarily move my hull to somewhere a bit more shielded. Swing around. Did not score fire. Don't have a great angle on a Nice now, so I'm gonna hit the Nelson instead. You can see the attack plane's fast recharging. Boost bar already refilled. Nelson relatively thinly armored. As you can see me strike him for 22 rockets there. Full penetrations all over. Nelson coated in 25mm armor. He's a British battleship, of course. So he takes pretty much full damage from the 33mm penetration of ours, especially when I am top tier. Nai's now pushing out. He's already dead to my allies. Kaga sending bombers after someone. I will probably the Bayern, but I don't want to fly out to get to deal with the Bayern, so I'm gonna swing by. You can see my earlier attack with the torpedo bombers, that reckless attack on the Nice now costing me quite a bit there. Nelson gets a fighter, but that's not gonna stop me. Fighter is just gonna prompt me to pre-drop once. Circle around behind him. Not going to use all the boost bar on the actual approach, so I can take my time. There's a corpse in my way, unfortunately. Helena pops up as well. We'll deal with you shortly. Need to start moving my hull further away. Nelson under fire, so there's no guarantee. But as you can see, I quickly arm my fighter before... I quickly arm my attack before the fighter plane can actually interdict me. Was gonna go after the Helena, but the La Glissonière works just as well. It's a thinly armored tier 6 cruiser, so very vulnerable to my rockets. My rocket squadron was pretty full up anyway. 9 plus 5 is 14, so 14 out of 16. So, good time to use it. Lightly armored targets are in abundance anyway in this game, so see if we can score some hefty hits onto the Legal. Gives me a nice side-on target. There's a North Carolina, but instead I'm going to swoop in on the Fusos just because they have lighter AA. Now the Fuso does have a thick 38mm armor deck, so going to go for the front half. Shot a bit early, so as you can see he shatters most of my rockets. Mostly non-penetrations and torpedo bulge hits. But it's just fine and dandy. He's still isolated. This Helena is suiciding himself, so don't need to deal with him at all, so just going to go after these two isolated Fusos. Gonna round the corner to make sure I don't get picked off by these Fusos pushing in case I don't kill them in time. I attacked the lead Fuso, so I'm gonna continue to attack the lead Fuso. The Legal would also be tempting to go after since I did score a fire, however he's being escorted by the North Carolina, and thanks to the relatively short damage control of the cruiser, he'll have it up again since this attack did take some time to kind of line up. You can see North Carolina to my left and the Fuso to my right, so obviously I'm going to make this attack pass onto this enemy Fuso, and then I'm going to swoop out to the right if I want to make a repeat attack. The other Fuso is probably too close for me to make a follow-up attack. 4 bomb hits, double fire, as you can see. Kind of right on top of him. Needed him to be a bit more distant if I want to do that. But because of the relatively comfortable proximity, I am going to make a follow-up attack, popping my engine cooling consumable just to make sure. Get a nice gliding pass. I'm going to recall there because I know already that I'm not going to have room. Got fires on both of those ships. We're doing some pretty hefty bullying this game. Not exactly the most challenging match, but hopefully these enemy North Carolina, for example, can extend the game a little bit. So I'm going to leave him alone, let him shoot the crap out of my Minsk maybe. Not worried about losing the game, just about the game ticking out, really. Lagal in the way, but the Fuso's the one I'm after. Although I will take the Lagal if he puts himself up. Touching the North Carolina's Aora is going to prompt me to pre-arm my attack. Let's see if the Lagal is respawning. He is respawning, making things difficult. I touch some North Carolina flak, which does damage me quite heavily. I've taken so long to get back here, however, that the Fuso's damage control is likely to have come back up. This was the first Fuso I hit, remember. To skim him with 1 torpedo. See if I can get a gliding attack onto the Lagal. It's fairly low now. Looks like I overled by a little bit. It's not great to look at this. It's okay, no, I do hit him. It's really, in a close game, you shouldn't be looking at what your torpedoes are doing. But this game's not particularly close. I wanted to see if I led properly, so we got to follow along. Having dispatched the Lagal, I'm gonna go after the North Carolina. He's closer than the Fusos, even though his A is pretty thick, but I have plenty of HEDPs to expend at this point. My Minsk has managed to stay alive in spite of all things. Clipping that NCAL flak, you can see NCAL has quite the AA suite. Trimming 2 of my planes on the way in. Not a perfect pass, but I do score 5 bomb hits, and the Alpha is enough to kill him. Because we're already here, even though these planes are fairly damaged, and because these Fusos have, well, tier 6 AA, I'm gonna go after them anyway, see if I can squeeze out a little more damage. Up to a very conservative 103 damage total. Just get right over the target, concerned about my plane health. Unfortunately, the bombs straddle. Next Fuso that dies is going to end the game more or less before I can get there, but just in case that there is time, such as if the enemy Fuso kills a Warspite and buys me a couple seconds, I'm going to launch the attack planes. I'm attacking tier 6 battleships with 25mm extremity armor. Oh, if that Kaga dispatches his Kariza, it's actually good for me. Unfortunately, he seems to have whiffed his pass on the Bayern. Well, anyway, I was launching rocket planes because they're the fastest squadron, so they're most likely to have the ability to reach their target before timer runs out. As you can see, they boost up to a airspeed of 214 knots, which is quite impressive. Cruise speed of 173. 985. I'm hoping to spot Kaga somewhere. Oh, unfortunately, he's all the way in the corner. It's going to take me at least another, probably like 5 ticks to get to him. So even if this full squadron, I'm not going to make it because I have 3 caps. And the cap sticking will end the game. In our favor, thankfully. So not the most exciting of games. We were top tier. So these things happen. 103,000 damage, very conservative. 8 torpedoes, 19 bomb hits, 2 in caps, 3 kills, 8 fires, 3 floods, 3 defender ribbons, 13 spotting ribbons, and 66 rocket hits. Team score wise, second from the top, but quite a bit below the top score, top tier. So top tier and only 1 destroyer, so mostly battleship bullying. Though we did start off the match by dumping probably around 8,000 damage into Bliskavika. But 1700, or 1 point shy of 1700, isn't too bad. Detailed report-wise, a good mix of munitions, but thanks to, as I fix my mouse, as you can see, it's not behaving very nicely. It's moving only in the vertical axis because of some glitches. Come on there. But as you can see, good balance of munitions. Come on there, mouse. No, it's not responding at all. But technical issues aside, you can see pretty good balance, but when you're top tier, the what's it called? The HEDB is quite powerful. There we go, Jesus. Anyhow, since the match was pretty plain Jane and I want something a little more challenging and more time to talk about the Lexington, let's head off into another match. Now, all banter aside, I do think the Lexington's actually an extremely powerful aircraft carrier, probably the second most powerful at Tier 8 in my personal opinion, just behind the Tier 8 premium American aircraft carrier Enterprise. Now, this is for several reasons. The primary of which being that the Lexington is capable of dealing with any target without any difficulty. This is, of course, because she is an American tech tree aircraft carrier. And what this means, of course, is that she has access to high explosive dive bombers, which, with that 53 millimeters of penetration, is able to handle basically 93% of all targets. Same goes for torpedo bombers. Unlike the Midway's anemic torpedo bombers, even after the buff, Midway torpedoes only hit for 5,053 damage. Lexington triple torpedoes, on the other hand, hit for 6,400. So hitting all three Lexington torpedoes is essentially the same as hitting just about 4 out of 6 Midway torpedoes. And honestly, on average, versus a maneuvering target, you usually only hit 2 to 3 Midway torpedoes. So the torpedo bomber squadron is honestly more versatile and more effective, really, against a wider variety of targets. It also has a much shorter arming time. And last but not least, the rockets, of course, are pretty decent. The Havars have 33 millimeters of penetration if you choose to take them, and they're devastating versus light targets, as we tried to demonstrate last game, though I don't think we got any particularly good salvos. There was an early Pensacola salvo, though, if I'm recalling correctly. But if you choose to do so, you can mount the Tiny Tims, which have 67 millimeters of penetration, which makes the rockets, which turns the rockets into a do-it-all kind of squadron. So the Lexington basically has tools to handle anything it wants. The only thing that keeps it down compared to the Enterprise is, well, the Enterprise is frankly overpowered and has basically all the same strengths, but with shorter regeneration times, because that's the Enterprise's gimmick. She has extremely short regen times on her planes, so she produces new aircraft much more quickly, which allows her to play attrition battles very well. And Enterprise has that overpowered 10-plane fighter squadron, so when she launches a escort fighter on her T key, she ends up using producing an enormous 10-plane fighter squad, which is basically larger in radius than any other fighter squadron in the game, tier 10s included. As I swoop onto the steering here with my scouting rockets, 11 rockets for 6,000 damage, or apparently 7,000 damage since I did not score a fire. But more importantly, I'm lighting him up for my team, giving intelligence data, and harassing the shit out of the steering, which honestly should have popped his smoke, but people don't do that. Another glancing hit, 7 rockets for an additional 3k. I'm sure he's enjoying himself. Shimakaze on the border. Still have 8 out of 9 rockets on the hull, so gonna chase with rockets yet again onto the border. I could bully the steering, who's completely alone, or I could spot out the Shimakaze for my gearing. One of these is more appealing than the other. Enemy Lexington on the meantime, attacking this Des Moines. By the way, in case you hadn't noticed, we are in a tier 10 match this time, so some nice contrast in this commentary. One bottom tier game, one top tier game. We're against an enemy Lexington, Montana, GK, JB, Tirpitz, so JB and Montana to worry about, and then Colbert, don't touch that thing at all. Baltimore, Chapayev, so Colbert and Baltimore obviously problematic. Daring still inside my spotting radius briefly becomes unspotted as I pass over the mountain range, trying to zero in on the range based on, okay, based on that information, we figure out he's over there. I'm gonna circle as tightly as possible because, as you can see, there's an AA cluster on the other side. Colbert and Baltimore means that is a no-fly zone. Someone sticks fire. He's gonna turn out into me, so I score another fire and another 11 rocket hits. At this point, the daring is hurting pretty bad. However, it's a destroyer fire, which means it doesn't take for that long. He's in an awkward position for me to hit. You can see the daring AA is pretty pathetic. I'm gonna guarantee this kill, however. Guarantee that this guy has a fun and engaging experience as far as we score the first blood. Fletcher in this cap. Again, I have 8 out of 9 rockets again. We've defended this cap that's close to me, D cap over here, so I'm actually going to divert my carrier. They're contesting this area. There's a Fletcher chase who was inside the cap. The only other ship nearby him is a Tirpitz. Tirpitz has next no AA, as I was beginning to mention, only JB and Montana to worry about in terms of battleships. So I'm going to go hover that Fletcher as well after ending the Daring's life. Fletcher moves back into the cap. He is in smokescreen, unfortunately, so can't necessarily threaten him. That smoke's been there for a while, though, now, so... Oh, Colbert is pushing in, which is going to make things a little more difficult. Don't want to just eat all my rocket planes into nothing. However, Colbert, in spite of having very fearsome AA, is also very thinly armored. So if I can find an angle onto him, I can actually put some pretty good damage onto him, I reckon. I'm going to use the cover of this mountain and the Colbert's own firing to try and get a rocket strike. 8 rockets onto him for 1,000 damage, not too bad. GK on his own, don't want to get too close to the cap. I don't have concealment expert on this captain. GK is nice and isolated in this bottom tier game. Obviously, we don't want to hit anything inside this big AA cluster. 1, the Colbert is there. 2, the Baltimore's there. 3, there's a fighter. 4, there's another battleship that I can't see. I think it's a Tirpitz. 5, there's a Jean Bar there, and 6 there's, well, what, 6 ships there? So definitely not something you want to tangle with. Instead, we're going to go after this GK, which is fairly conservative AA for a tier 10. It has marginally upgraded AA over the Knives now at tier 7, so that's it's not saying much, really. I'll deal with that Shimakaze in the, was that west? In the west soon-ish. GK launches a fighter, unfortunately, so he's going to tag up to 4 of my planes. But that still does mean I'll make 4 strikes, popping my heel as his AA trims down my planes. Continue the turn. Do manage to score a strike and find the Shimakaze for my lovely allies over there. Enemy is pushing. Do hit the 3 torpedoes onto the GK, but it does cost me my squadron thanks to the help of the fighter. Colbert is now actually alone, which raises some interesting questions. So let's do a Colbert AA test. Now the only way I'm going to be able to get these fragile tier 8 planes, or relatively fragile tier 8 planes, onto this Colbert is with a slingshot. He looks to be reversing, so I can't do it too early. It is not going to be a straight line slingshot. Note that I'm going to have to make a turn, so it has to be done even closer as well. So at 7, I'm going to try this slingshot. So I'm going to try and punch through the AA aura, already in AA, in AA, and use my immunity frames to dodge the majority of his long-range AA, which is where a lot of his power actually is. He's moving forward in response, however, so we're going to have to launch early. I am unable to clip him, but I do force him forward again, which is nice. It's something. Right, 1 cap to 1 cap. My gearing is contesting B. There used to be a Shimakaze there, but he left. And my planes are spotted by, well, a Tirpitz pushing through. My carrier hull gets detected, which means I need to turn immediately. Remember, there's high tier battleships over here. They definitely have the range to hit me. What's that? Oh, that's enemy flag. Right. Well, make a small gaff there. Going to hunt that Shimakaze for my gearing. I don't want to stay detected. My allies dispatch the Tirpitz, however that 2 HP Baltimore dispatches my Des Moines. Still trying to turn my carrier hull for stated reasons. Touch the A or the GK, glide back out. clipped that Turpit's flak earlier, so I don't have that much plane health. If I was a Shimakaze, where would I be? Well, enemy Lexington, as you can see, has not moved from his spawn, so he's going to be in trouble shortly. Pop a fighter. Hunting the shimmy. Maybe I would hunt the Bugogne, who has done... I don't know what he's done, honestly, but... Okay, so he's not inside my vision, so... He's still not inside my vision. Either he's gone very far away or he's over the mountain. My suspicion, though, is that he's left this cluster. Can't afford to dick around too much, so I'm going to help with the Lexington kill. Pre-drop once in order to avoid taking too many plane losses, but after that I need every single plane left to punch through that fighter and AA. For some reason his carrier hull's AA is off, as you can see from the fact that I'm not being engaged by AA. Slammed 14 rockets into his side for a nice 9,000 damage. There's a 2 HP Baltimore which they're allowing to cap, which I would prefer they not do. Thunder rams the Colbert, which is not something you see every day. Have a very, very pathetic damage total. Baltimore gets lit up. Hopefully one of the destroyers just shoots him. It's at 1700 HP. Baltimore, please just shoot him. No one's shooting him. Big pity. Small consolations. Finally they dispatched the Baltimore, but not before he put some damage out. Shimakaze dispatches my Thunder, which rammed the Colbert just now, so that tells me the Shimakaze is somewhere on the other side. I guess we already knew that since we couldn't find him earlier with our spotting bubble, but it's not nothing. So I'm going to slingshot onto 2 combined A. Cluster is going to prefer the Jean Bar because he's slightly easier to deal with and at a better angle. It has 2 high tier battleships with good AA, so I'm going to need my aircraft engine or cooling consumable first of all. Second of all, I'm going to need to get quite close. We can do 6-5. Last time on the Colbert, I still was not quite as close as I wanted to be after the drop, thanks to having to make that turn. This time I do basically get into the range I want to be about 3 kilometers out, so I have enough time to rearm, because there's a cooldown after the slingshot, of course, but to be quite close to avoid most of the long range. Almost get a perfect strike, 5 bomb hits, however, no fire is disappointing in spite of the 57% fire chance. Relaunch for my torpedo bombers. My squadrons are fairly healthy still, you'll note. Have been somewhat conservative with them in this top tier game, resulting in a conservative damage total. But these things happen. I'm gonna defend my cluster here. Rocket planes attacking this cluster, however. Shimakaze shows up. Oh, that's the Fletcher actually, sorry. He's engaging. Jean Bar turning away, but he's fairly low, so I'm going to start positioning to get onto the Montana. That looks like it's going to be no dice either. Targets get dispatched. Now it's onto the Lexington as before. Remember, you have to punch through that fighter to get to the Lexington, so it's simply wasteful to send all 9 aircraft. He's going to have his fighter back up. I'm looking for the Lexington. I know about where he is. Once I spot him, I'm going to drop a fighter so my allies will have continual air spotting. Looks like he's around this area. So he's right behind that rock you can see based on the escort fighter. So I'm going to circle around the other way so I can get a fighter. Oh, he's very low. So I only need to land 1 torpedo, so even though the angle is kind of awkward, I can just take my time here and ram 1 home. Let these converge. He's starting his engine, but should be a fairly good angle. Now normally I would recall immediately, but I kind of want to watch this for you guys, so let's see if I can land those torpedoes onto the side on hull. And of course, it's not a very difficult hit on a non-moving target, so we do land that and clean this up. A very conservative top tier game. You can definitely do a lot more, or bottom tier game rather. You can definitely do a lot more, but it does depend on the circumstances. Only 55,000 damage this time. 4 torpedo strikes, 5 bomb hits, 4 in-caps 2 kills, 1 fire, and 57 rocket hits. Honestly, most of our impact came through the early game from eliminating that daring. As a result of eliminating that daring, however, we did score at least second on the team, but pretty stompy weekend game. Once more, we have, what, most of the daring's health? Probably like 75% after his heal, so not too bad, but again, nothing to write home about. Game was fairly short as it was the first one, so we'll try one more time to get our opponents to cooperate and actually put up a fight. Heading into the third, and what I hope will be the final match, we are once more bottom tier. So 8 to 10 matchmaking. We're on the map Okinawa, the most domination, where it's a Shokaku. Enemy has a Montana, Iowa, Alsace, Vladivostok. So Vladivostok is vulnerable, the other 3 not so much, although the Alsace is thinly armored to complete the 32mm French plate, which means our Havars actually pen him all over, so that's pretty good. And then Zhao, Smolensk, Rune, Cleveland. Don't want to deal with an Edinburgh. Don't want to deal with Smolensk or Cleveland. Rune or Zhao are acceptable, but not ideal. And then Khabarovsk, Fletcher. So Kaba, depending on if he's Smoke or Fletcher, is going to have a better or worse time against us. We would prefer him to be heal. The heal Kaba without the Smoke, because that's just easier to pick off. Just treat him like a French destroyer, except he doesn't have the improved saturation mechanics, which means he takes a lot of damage from rocket planes. Of course, this 15mm plate does shatter our shells. Attempting to look for the northern destroyer with my rocket planes early on, but get pushed off. Khabarovsk, however, has his AA on, which means, well, thanks for telling me where you are. I wonder what will happen next. He's nice and side on still. Take my time, get the ellipse to narrow. Spray him with 9 rockets, nice 5600. Find a Cleveland, however. So I'm going to pull away. At this point, keeping him lit. Clip some more Cleveland flak. Unfortunately, going to try and make one last pass onto him. Someone popped through the defensive fire, unfortunately, so that's going to push us away and off. My team is pushing south, so I will push south. I'm identifying where the enemies are. Fletcher. So Aiden will be the first one into the cap. Considering I'm going to have to force through several cruisers, I'm going to launch the torpedo bombers now. It's not an ideal approach angle. I'm going to come in from the south, so I'm going to come around. So it's not ideal because it's going to take me a while to fly this route, but that way I'll be able to hit the Edinburgh and have this torpedo bomber's heal to help punch through that combined Rune, Cleveland, Aiden AA. My Changmu has launched deep water torpedoes. These are Changmu deep waters, not Asashio deep waters, so they do still hit cruisers. So if this Aiden clips a rogue torpedo, he's going to be in trouble. You can see B is no longer ticking. You can either eyeball this or eyeball this. Oh no, it's still ticking, so I know he's outside of the cap still. 2 of the Changmu torpedoes disappear, which means that they hit something. And indeed, of course, the Changmu does dispatch the Edinburgh. Kaba up. Now I'm using 40 knot torpedo acceleration torpedoes. However, that doesn't mean that it's very easy to hit the 44 knot Khabarovsk. He's actually still faster than me. But just spotting him out is part of my job here, so I take my time. I have torpedo bombers modification 1. So I have nice long runtime. It's actually faster than these torpedoes technically, but he's maneuvering, so he's going to lose some speed. Looks like he's turning out into the north. Have to give him a fair lead. If he just continues turning in a big circle, however, he's going to dodge these, but you do what you gotta do. need to lead by a lot. If he just continues straight, he'll dodge these. Not an ideal circumstance, but I'm going to continue to harass the Khabarovsk because I'm bottom tier and because he's easy to access. And who doesn't like free things, right? Cruisers are still clustered, they're still basically staying together and making life difficult for me, so I'm going to make life difficult for someone who I can actually punish. In this case, the Khabarovsk. We have one cap control. We have one cap. We don't have cap control necessarily. There are Fletchers inside the cap. I could definitely harass him, but he's not nearly as free to hit as this Kaba. Continue to make this guy's life miserable. I hope you're enjoying the carrier rework, my friend. Hit the Kaba flag. As you can see, it does hurt. 5 rockets and another fire. You should probably damage control if you have it. He's triple fired. He damage controls now. I'm going to use my engine cooling so I can jam back on the engine cooling and do this. Wait to try and get a slightly more accurate strike. No dice there. Need to cycle my squadrons. Meanwhile, my teammates have been working on that Cleveland. Gonna go up towards that Fletcher. He did smoke recently. Kaba's at about half. We'll finish him off later. Cleveland dies to the Chunk Mu. Enemy Shokaku harassing with torpedo bombers. Gonna protect the forward lead section of my squadrons. Alsace has been pushing, but he's pushing quite alone, so even if I can't find the Fletcher, it looks like he's still in smoke indeed. I can harass the Alsace. Now the Alsace, as I mentioned, not an ideal target. I'm going to circle around, don't want to get too far from the battlefield. We have both southern and central cap control for the moment, so. It's hard for me to triangulate without concealment expert, but even with it, it wouldn't help that much. I'm gonna help this Hindi out though. This Hindi is technically almost entirely immune, so with his 27mm plate, I know he's inside my detection radius. Because, so he's outside of his smoke, he's the only other ship in the vicinity. As the Hindenburg, as you saw, did dispatch, but as I was saying, the Hindenburg has 27mm plate in terms of armor, as we do light up the Fletcher. He doesn't have smoke. He's gonna beach himself in order to dodge out on the Hindenburg, but that's perfectly fine for me. I mean, I'm just gonna get perfect hits onto him. He has his AA off, so I'm gonna just drop a fighter. Might actually even wait if I wanted to. I could just abort that drop and redrop after 6,000 on the first pass. He really should turn his AA on. Holding down on the air brake in order to tighten my turn radius. He's coming toward me with his broken engine. He appears to have accepted his death. Bismarck dispatches him. Just gonna take a look for that, what is that, Irian? It must be the rune before I leave. Rune shows himself. It's not like a horrifically hard a target, so gonna be imperfect. I don't want to spend too much time here, but 2 bombs or 2 planes and 4 bombs is not bad. Aim a little early, so score 3 out of 4, not too shabby. Who's vulnerable? Gonna finish off the Kaaba, honestly. Just bully the destroyers into submission. Bottom tier game. Not too able to impact. My team has had cap control for most of the game, but thankfully they at least did take 1 cap. Gonna continue to bully this Kaaba. So not doing so hot in terms of the damage average department, but you can't always get what you want. Let's just leave it at that. Popping engine cooling to make sure we get there in a timely fashion. I'm going to stop at about half bar to make sure we have a full bar to engage this Khabarovsk. If he turns in, which is actually quite intelligent on his part, if he's identified that we're using Havars. Havars, of course, have that big side-on ellipse. Don't want to quite approach him from the butt, so I'm going to let him slide against that island. Now he has to either turn out into me or just beach himself. He chooses, of course, to turn out and keep moving. So now I get a nice ellipse. Another 3,000 on that spread. Gonna circle out, use the cover of this island, swing out and around. And this should be a very comfy approach with the fast moving Corsairs on the other way around. Unfortunately, don't skim quite enough rockets to finish him off myself, but it does do enough to help my ally Changmu, who took the cap initially and eliminated Edinburgh, finish him off. I'm gonna go for these guys in the north because they're a bit closer. Gonna let this Montana duel these guys and hopefully die, honestly. I want a little more playtime in this match. Enemy Shokaku harassing the Hindenburg instead of the Montana, which is interesting. The Montana is equally isolated. He does have better A than Hindenburg, but depending on where the Shokaku is located, he might be a better target, especially since currently is fighting two of his allies. Looks like the Shokaku is just straight up closer to the Hindenburg, and that's why he's harassing him. It is fine by me. Turns out he is here. I air spot him. He doesn't have CE, based on that information. Also means that the Iowa is going to be incredibly difficult to harass thanks to the proximity of the Shokaku. I need to lead ahead of the Iowa's bow if I'm going to hit the Shokaku. Which of course means I'm going to go into the Shokaku's overlapping aura and also risk touching his defense fighter. Also touching the rune here who is beached. Which is obviously not ideal. Iowa is not reversing, right? No, I think he is reversing. He is reversing, confirmed. Reversing, confirmed. So I'm gonna launch. This might still be under lead though in terms of hitting him. I think the first one's gonna miss his bow, yep. You scored a last two though. But the Iowa A is sufficient to trim me. Gonna go after the rune. And put myself into the cap. Don't really care if they shoot at me. If they shoot at me, fine. Uh-oh. In the south, my allies dispatch what's left of them. Can I get the chaos on this rune? That's the real question. Hindenburg did just slam him pretty heftily with a AP salvo. The answer is no. That's quite fine. Timer's gonna tick out. Oof. Alright, that was not something you wanted to do there as I clipped some flak. In case you were wondering. You can see the Iowa A defense is quite heavy. Gonna launch my next heaviest squadron. He's at 25,000 health, so unless he takes a big AP salvo from the LSAS, enough is gonna chip him down from 27,000 immediately, which means I do have time to use something other than rockets. Rockets again pen him all over, except that 38mm central armor section found on all high-tier American battleships, starting at North Carolina. I get spotted, but that's fine. Don't really care. Have a full squadron here. If I connect all three of those, he will die. Iowa on the other side dispatches my Changmu, which is interesting. Pop my cooling consumable to adjust my angle properly with speed. You can see the SB2C is still quite sluggish, even one boosted. Arming out just outside of AA to try and get the attack off, but I unfortunately do not get the attack off onto the Shokaku, and our final action will be, well, dispatching the Iowa. Another victory, 57,000 damage, 3 torpedo hits, 9 bomb hits, 1 fighter shot down, 1 cap, 1 ship destroyed, 2 fires, 1 solo capture, 12 spotting ribbons, 42 rocket hits, and 3 planes interdicted by fighter. Team score-wise, however, 2,000 base experience, better than all the previous 2 games. This is, of course, because of our target selection. Oh, I had a former clanmate on my team. I didn't even notice. Let me report you. Just kidding, that's toxic. Anyway. All jokes aside, if we go to the detailed report, not too much damage, but you'll note we have most of the Khabarovsk and some of the Fletcher, and so that's where our high base experience is coming from. Target selection, So if you're grinding, you do want to go after the important targets or priority targets if you can. Because of this bottom tier game, my damage is focused more onto, well, my damage distribution will be based on what targets I went after. Since I went after mostly destroyers, I have a much higher rocket percentage than I would normally. However, you can see the bombs still doing most of the or more of the heavy lifting in terms of raw alpha, and that is, of course, thanks to the actual bombs. But 3 games in, we should probably wrap up our Lexington saga here for now. No super carry games, unfortunately, but that is the nature of the weekend. Games can be extremely swingy. I will take my 3 victories. That at least does show some consistency in power level. Anyhow, going over our Lexington build. Module-wise, we're taking the 2 aircraft mods in slots 1 and 2, so aircraft modification 1 and aircraft engine modification 1. In slot 3, we're taking TBM 1, so torpedo bombers modification 1. This adds 5 seconds to your torpedo bomber's aiming time, and what this allows you to do is arm your torpedo bombers from outside of AA range, typically at about 8 to 7 kilometers, depending on target and their speed and their relative distance. Get a nice fully narrowed in drop and get a nice perfect accurate first drop. In slot 4, I take bombers modification. This has twofold reasons. One, the HEDB is the primary damage source of the Lexington. It's the most versatile squadron, so you can use it against cruisers, destroyers, battleships, carriers, you name it. So it's the most versatile squadron. And 2, the torpedo bombers already have their own heal, which gives them added durability on top of their HP. So taking a bomber's health is preferable to me. And in slot 5, I take deck space. The Lexington does have pretty poor concealment, as you can see, 14.5 with no concealment expert on the captain, but if I were to spec CE, which I am planning on doing at some point, let me see if I can do it now, actually. Okay, no, I can't. I'm not spending free experience on captain. But if I were to take CE, you can actually bring it down quite reasonably. For context, 14.5 is pretty bad, but manageable. It's not as horrendous as the Graf Zeppelin's 15.7 when she has no CE at all, but it is pretty close to the midway, even with CE. If I scroll over to my midway, for example. So my midway captain is a 19-pointer, so he does have concealment. 13.8 is about the limit of being comfortable. Anything over 14 is pretty uncomfortable, so Lexington without CE is pretty can be pretty disconcerting. You're basically permanently spotted, especially on smaller maps, but it is what it is. You stay behind cover, play a little more conservatively, position less aggressively, and you'll be just fine. So take the extra regen and deck space. The Lexington doesn't necessarily need it as badly as, say, the Saipan does, but it definitely does help. It brings your squadrons from 14 to 16, which is still a substantial increase. Module-wise, you always want to go for torpedo bombs first, and then it's up to you. Going for rockets is fine. I personally would prefer to use or upgrade the Helldivers first because I think the stock Hellcat is pretty okay, whereas the stock Avenger is pretty... I wouldn't say mediocre. As you can see, the torpedo damage remains the same. It's just the hull aspects are different. It's slower, squishier, etc., etc. But it's mainly my preference. But as you did see, the rocket planes on the Lexington do a lot of heavy lifting, so I can see some merit for upgrading dive bombers, then rockets, then torpedo bombers. As I mentioned just now, having access to healing consumable onto torpedo bombers does a lot to alleviate any health problems, so it's not too shabby. This is my standard American carrier build going forward to the captain. So this is, of course, the 9 core points. Some people don't take torpedo acceleration, but I tend to think that is a mandatory skill. If you recall the Two Brothers game, when I torpedoed that Bliskavica, for example, taking torpedo acceleration makes your torpedoes much more comfortable to use in general, but also allows you to at least have the option of dealing with most destroyers. If you bring them up to 40 knots, as they do with torpedo acceleration on American carriers, you can match the speed of most destroyers, but if you're at 35, then many destroyers can actually beat you. And as you saw in this last match with the Khabarovsk, even with torpedo acceleration, there's some destroyers that can already beat you in terms of speed and just straight up outrun your torpedoes. So without torpedo acceleration, you don't have any chance at all, essentially, in terms of catching them. So I prefer this core 9 skills, so that's air supremacy, torpedo acceleration, aircraft armor, and survivability expert. From this point, you're free to do essentially whatever you want. Any carrier can operate with just these 9 skills. So carriers are pretty unique in that they can operate with a 9-point captain rather than a 10-point captain. After that, I personally probably would take plane speed, improved engines, and then last gasp. So that puts you up to a core 12 skills. From here, demolition expert goes to 15, and concealment expert tops off my build when we get to 19. If you don't think concealment expert is necessary, you can take site stabilization instead. If you don't think site stabilization or concealment expert are necessary, you can take it's pretty difficult for the Lexington, so you could take 2 1-pointers. There's a bunch of combinations you can take. You can not take plane speed and take concealment expert plus the 2 1-pointers, or not take plane speed and take site stabilization plus the 2 1-pointers. But where you go from here is pretty up to you. Demolition expert on the American carriers is not bad at all. You have the high explosive dive bombers, and you have the high explosive rockets. Do keep in mind, however, that taking demolition expert makes your captain slightly less optimal for the Enterprise. If you're running the Enterprise, you probably actually want to run a Japanese style captain. So if I pull up my Shokaku captain, for example, my Shokaku, because she only has access to one HE squadron, doesn't need demolition experts, so instead she takes a modified build with both site stabilization and concealment expert. Site stab, pretty useless on most squadrons, but it's particularly good on bombers, as you can see, plus 15% aiming speed, and it's particularly important on AP dive bombers, because AP dive bombers tend to take quite a while to aim, and you really want to get that maximum aim time. So this is the captain I would suggest for Enterprise, but Lexington uses my Lexington / Midway captain. I was running with my 15-point Lexington captain, but for the full build and the optimal build path, you want to use one of your Ovechkin captains if you haven't, because of the improved survivability expert, and you round out the build that the Lexington had with concealment expert. Anyhow, this commentary's run on for long enough. It's been a full 3 games, and I've been talking long enough for my voice to get kind of hoarse, so we'll wrap things up for here. That was the Tier 8 aircraft carrier Lexington. Not the most impressive in terms of damage totals, but base experience says enough in terms of Lexington pulling its own weight. So that'll be all for now. I'll catch you all later, and I hope you're enjoying your winter season. Cheers.